Galaxy is one of the most memorable Mario games ever created and is filled with some great bosses and some bad bosses. So today, I'm going to share with you my personal ranking for all bosses in Super Mario Galaxy. Starting off at number 15 is Burr. This boss was by far my least favorite of them all. The fight just felt boring and unoriginal. He barely even attacks you. This boss fight also ended fairly quickly. It shouldn't even be a boss, more like a mini-boss. The Mandibug stack was also pretty garbage. Again, this shouldn't even be a boss. It is literally just two Mandibugs stacked on top of each other. It also puts up no fight. It barely has any special abilities and is practically just fighting a normal Mandibug with slightly more health. The only reason this one gets put farther down on the list than Burr is because this one only slightly fights. Burr just didn't fight at all. So the Mandibug stack gets number 14 on the list. The Underrun Gunner is also a pretty underwhelming boss. You do fight him 3 times in game, and his abilities are slightly different each time, although I'm going to be sticking with the first phase of all the boss fights so we can keep this list pretty small. In the fight, you don't really do much, fighting. You just have to have ground pound on the glass a couple times above him, and then boom, you get the power star. That being said, I did really like the environment you fight him in. The spikes around him were nice, and how you need to get the button to unlock the stairs were pretty cool. But the fact that the room you fight him in needs to carry this entire fight should explain for itself why it takes number 13 on the list. Mega Leg was cool, but again, it's kinda only for the environment. You basically just climb up this giant robot, which is really cool, but then once you get to the top, all you have to do is lead a bullet bill onto the little glass dome on his head, and then you basically win. So that's why he's somewhat tricky. I decided to put him this high up on the list though, because I want to rank the bosses based on how fun it is to fight, not how cool they look. So Mega Leg gets number 12 on the list. Camilla gets number 11 on the list. This fight was pretty fun, but you fight her so many times in the game that it just becomes stale and unfun. Unfun? Is that even a word? So yeah, there's not really much to say about her. She only has like 2 or 3 attacks, which for a boss is horrible. But she gets 11 on the list because her attacks, while not having many, are pretty good. Next up on the list is Bowser Jr. Now hear me out. I know technically Mega Leg is a Bowser Jr. boss because Bowser Jr. created him, but all the attacks and everything is just a lot different than Bowser Jr. The fight with Bowser Jr. is fun, I guess. It wasn't bad, but it also wasn't particularly good. It was kind of just in the middle. But I do like how you have to throw the Koopa shells at the ship to defeat him. It's a pretty cool idea, and that's why it gets number 10 on the list. Now Major Burrows gets number 9th on the list. He had many great attacks, which were generally hard to counter, and it was pretty fun. Although with all the attacks he had, some were pretty annoying. The one where you need to ground pound near him to get him up, and you had to time it so perfectly, it was just so annoying, and that's why I gave him 9th on the list. It wasn't bad, but it also wasn't really good. Dyna Piranha is definitely the most recognizable on the list. When I think of Mario Galaxy, that's the boss I think of. And while having fairly basic attacks, he's the OG. And yes, I know that technically you do fight a fire version of him later in the game, but is that really a separate boss? But the normal Dyna Piranha is pretty cool. I also love his design. And the way that you defeat him is great, so he gets 8th on the list. In 7th place is Bowser. The fight with him is just overall pretty great, and I found myself genuinely struggling to defeat him a few times. Although he does have the exact same attacks every single time you fight him, except for the final battle where he finally uses some new attacks. Overall, it was pretty fun, so it gets 7th on the list. In 6th place, we got Bugaboom. Now this one was a pretty cool boss, which is pretty hard to beat. Like Major Burrows, you had to time your ground pound so perfectly that it would hit him, and you had to do that a couple times, and it was just pretty annoying. But the fight was really fun. I also did love his design. There's really not much to say about him, other than the fact that I don't really like when he rolled to his side and he throws the bombs, but that's about it. So he gets 6th on the list. Tarantox was one of the most unique bosses yet. I absolutely loved how he utilized the sling pods to get around the environment. It was a pretty simple fight, but it was still very, very fun, so he gets 5th on the list. So now we're getting a lot closer to my top 3, and Top Maniac is definitely really close to making it in. It was just such a cool idea for the boss, and although it is quite similar to the Top Men enemies, it brings so much more to the table than them. It's just a great boss in general, and I know I've said it before, but his design is just so cool. He gets number 4 on the list. Now we're officially in the top 3, and King Calliant has to take number 3. The idea of having to deflect melons back at him is just so random and goofy, which fits Mario perfectly. Again, the environment where you fight him in is great. When you fight him the second time, it is a bit better, although I did say at the start that I'll be focusing on the Phase 1 fights. Even so, it's just a great boss fight overall. He looks so cool and is definitely my favorite lava-themed boss in Mario. At number 2 we have King Fin. This was very close to being my all-time favorite boss, but I only put him in second because I just don't really like water levels. Although everything else about him kind of makes up for it. He just looks so cool, and the idea of having to throw Koopa shells at him is also really cool. Kind of reminds me of another boss. I did really like this boss, but the next one is just even cooler. And finally, at the number 1 spot, we've got Bouldergeist. This one was my all-time favorite boss ever. I'm a huge fan of Luigi's Mansion, and this boss just gives off those kind of vibes. It seems like it would live in a haunted mansion or something, which he definitely would. Once you use the new bomb boost he launches at you to destroy his rock armor, you'll see that he was a ghost this whole time. And speaking of the bomb boosts, they are amazing. I wish we saw more of them in the game. You can spin near them to swing them at things, and once they hit something, they'll explode. But anyways, Bouldergeist has 2 waves. After you destroy his armor once, he'll create 2 massive hands which he'll use to punch you. This fight was just awesome, and I hope you see why it was number 1. But that's going to do it for this video. I know it's a lot different from my other uploads, but I just finished replaying Mario Galaxy, and I wanted to share with you my list of the bosses in it. Here's my ranking in a tier list format, and say in the comments if you agree with my ranking. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.